Poonam, when you are good to go, please tell us when the live streaming starts. So then we can start the webinar. Just tell me. Okay. So as soon as you tell, then Dr. Preeti, you please take over.
Good evening, Dr. Naveen.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, Ji. Good evening. Good evening, Dr.
Katyal sir, good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Sir, all well, sir.
Very good.
Good evening, Dr. Katyal.
Good evening.
Dr. Katyal, good evening.
Very good evening, Ji. Very good evening.
Good evening. Ever smiling, Katyal sir.
Oh, big faces. Very good. After a long time, Dr. Mahesh?
Yeah, face to face after a long time.
Yeah.
और सिन्हा साहब कैसे हैं?
बस बढ़िया भागवत साहब और सब बढ़िया.
Yes, Poonam, we are ready. Whenever you speak, we can start. Just tell us so that we can start.
Live meeting. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Everyone.
Good evening.
Myself, Dr. Preeti Gehlot. I'm professor at Department of Anesthesia in PGIMS Rohtak. I welcome you all to this stupendous evening, which is under the Knowledge Attitude Practices, the KAP Academic Series. And in this series today, we'll be discussing about medico-legal issues in private practice based on true scenarios that we face every day and many of us may face in future in our careers. So we have a lot of esteemed faculty members joining us and PGs, students, colleagues. So I welcome everybody on the platform, and to formally start the session, I invite my colleague, Dr. Priyanka Bansal, Associate Professor, to further introduce the faculty formally. Dr. Priyanka, I think you're muted. You need to unmute yourself.
Good evening, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, now you are. Please go ahead.
Okay. So no one needs introduction, but still, for a formal introduction, we'll start with Dr. S.C. Parekh. He was ISA National Vice President in 2006, 2 terms as GC member, and for ISA AP State, he has served as Secretary, Vice President, and President. Presently, he is the President of Family Benevolent Fund of ISA. He is the Founder President of Association of Indian Ophthalmic Anesthesiologists. Next on the panel, we have Dr. A.L. Meenakshi Sundaram. He is the Director of Medical Education, Tamil Nadu State. His major achievement is as Vice President, ISA National. He has a number of other feathers to his cap as the Best Teacher Awardee in Tamil Nadu, Dr. MGR Medical University, Best Doctor Awardee, Poet, and Tamil Scholar Awardee. Well, that's quite interesting, sir. Moving on next, Dr. Baljit Singh. He is an assessor for National Boards of Examination. He is a subject expert for UPSC and various state public service commissions. He is a member board of directors, Indian Confederation of Healthcare Accreditation. He is a treasurer of Indian Society for the Study of Pain, member governing council ISA National, vice president Indian Society of Anesthesiologists, member of Indian Medical Advisory Council, Smile Train. He is the director scientific committee and presently CEO and present designing Indian College of Anesthesiologists. Next, we have Dr. Sunil Katyal. He is the Deputy Director, Medical Services, SPS Hospitals, Ludhiana. His major achievements are President-elect IMA 2024. He is the Trustee of Indian College of Anesthesiologists. Chairman Disciplinary Committee, Punjab Medical Council, Vice President, ISA National, ex-professor and Head Department of Anesthesia, Ludhiana. Finally, we have Dr. Suresh Bhargav. He is the Senior Consultant and HOD, Critical Care, Shelby Hospital, Jaipur. His major achievements is the past Vice President, ISA National, Organizing Secretary, ISACON 2015, Jaipur. He has number of publications, international, national. And I hand over for the next introduction, Dr. Preeti.
Thank you, Dr. Priyanka. So I'll continue the introduction part, though we have very renowned faculty with us, but because it is a formal introduction, so I'll go ahead with the same. Next in the series, we have Dr. Anjali Bhure. Madam is Professor and Head at NKP Salve Institute of Medical Sciences and RC and LM. Her areas of interest are obstetric anesthesia, CPR, and public awareness programs. Her achievements are that she has national and international publications, which are quite in number. Vice President, ISA National, Governing Counseling Member, ISA National 2016 to 19, Honorary Secretary, West Zone of ISA 2009 to 15, President, ISA NCB 2009, and MSCISA Advisory Board Member, Organizing Chairman from Nagpur. We welcome you, ma'am. Next in series, I welcome Dr. Arun Kumar Sharma. He is Director Critical Care, Palliation and Post-ICU Rehab. He is MD Anesthesia and PGDMLE along with CCEPC. He is General Secretary, ISCCM Chandigarh branch, and he has interest in promoting and ensuring safe ICU care, palliation and end-of-life care, legal aspects of medicine. And final panelist we have with us is Dr. Mahesh Kumar Sinha. He is Director Academics at Ramakrishna Care. His interest is in ethics and medico-legal field. And he's Vice President, ISA National, past State President, ISA, past State President, IMA, past State President, AHPI, and he is Executive Council Member of ISCCM National. We welcome you, sir. And finally, today's moderator, these were the panelists, and today's moderator for this series is Dr. Naveen Malhotra. Again, I don't think he needs an introduction, but because this is a formal academic program, he is currently Senior Professor and Head Cardiac Anesthesia and Pain Management Center, PGIMS Rohtak. And he himself says that dear ISCNs relate to me as our own secretary. Yes, sir. He is our own secretary, ISA National 2018 to 22, ISA Bhopal Award for Academic Excellence 2015, KPR Young Anesthesiologist National Award 2009, KOP Award in Critical Care 2001, and he has 216 publication and 426 presentations. Yes, that's true. And his areas of interest are cardiac anesthesia and chronic pain management. So with that, I stop sharing my screen, and without further delay, because everybody is waiting to listen to the program, I hand it over to today's moderator, Dr. Naveen Malhotra, to take the program forward.
Thank you, Dr. Preeti and Dr. Priyanka, for doing the honors, and I welcome all the panelists. There are two disclaimers. Though today's program is based on real scenarios, but any resemblance to living or dead is purely coincidental. Two, there are different scenarios in different cities. And in law, there are certain things which are black and white, but still there will be some areas which will be gray. So I kickstart first thing. A patient, a young, healthy patient, is undergoing an elective surgery under spinal anesthesia, or the other scenario is under general anesthesia. In both the scenarios, immediately after giving spinal anesthesia or during induction of anesthesia, patient becomes pulseless, hypotension occurs, and resuscitation is occurring. Power cord. Resuscitation is occurring. Immediately, the anesthesiologist colleague calls for help and another anesthesiologist comes into the scenario. Another fellow anesthesiologist colleague rushes to the center, for the help for his colleague. In the meantime, surgeon whose surgery has not started, he also calls his physician friend. And the physician also arrives. And attendants, they are started getting jittery. And the anesthesiologist colleague enters the OT. Now, my first question is that there is a scenario in which is an elective procedure. Anesthesia has been induced or spinal anesthesia has been given, and immediately following that, patient becomes hypotensive, pulseless, incision has not been given. Anesthesiologist colleague has come to the OT. Dr. Anjali Bhure.
Yes, sir.
What would be the ideal response of the fellow anesthesiologist colleague whom this anesthesiologist has called with good intent for help?
Sir, as you said that while induction and after giving spinal, there is immediate arrest and they are in the process of resuscitation and they call for help and the anesthetist arrives. Now, when the second anesthetist is coming there, he will add on to it is expected that he will add on to the expertise in terms of treatment. He's going to help the person, the anesthetist who is in charge of that patient and would help him. Suppose because the anesthetist who's at the head end might have his thoughts blocked and he can guide that person. And it will be preferable to have a senior and experienced anesthesiologist if he's fortunate. Otherwise, even if the other anesthetist is there, at least he will help in expertise in treatment. And when this resuscitation is going on, he can guide the whole team as to what needs to be done wherever he thinks that something else needs to be in the line of treatment. As the case proceeds, and I mean the resuscitation is going on, he can be a great support to the team there, including the anesthesiologist who's present there as head of the team. And if it further goes, he should be a great help to the documentation, because now event-wise, minute to minute, or maybe say 5 minutes, 10 minutes, the documentation is going on. So you have to delegate one person for the documentation. So he can keep on guiding and he can see whether the line of treatment is proper or not. In case it goes further, and suppose if they think that there is some equipment failure or due to oxygen failure or whatever, he can be of great help in finding out the source, like in equipment or drugs related, like expiry and all. So all these in the process of documentation, and he can be a great professional support as well as the emotional support. But before we go on to this, there should be a message to the private practitioners that they go on from one nursing home to other nursing home. So first of all, we have to see whether that hospital is registered or not. You have to work with the people who are qualified. So qualification also is very important of the staff who is working there, and then whether the medical gases are there and the standard monitoring is available, like ventilator or defibrillator. So all these things will carry very important aspect in terms of line of treatment.
Madam, you're right that the fellow anesthesiologist who has been called is with good intent.
Yes.
It should not be like this. Well, if somebody has been called for help, his response should not be like this, ke, aapne ye case kyun karwaya? Why you got this case done? Or maybe why this was not done. So at that time, the general message to the colleague is to be absolutely supportive, and the person who is undergoing this situation is definitely under stress. And another person, if we come, Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram sir,
Yes.
The behavior should be like this, that he or she is supportive to the person. Maybe there are certain faults or certain not faults, maybe certain shortcomings that can be discussed later on. Now, for anything, sir, whether we all are worried about the medico-legal aspects. And in court of law, it is always said complications do occur, but whether reasonable level of medical care was extended to that patient or not, whether a complication which occurred that was managed with reasonable standards, established standards of the medical care or not. So, sir, can you elaborate further on this, sir? Because today's session is not about dealing the cases in the court of law. Today's session is about preparing what you are going to do in the court of law at that point of time. Your views on that, sir?
Thanks, Dr. Naveen, for having given me this chance in the KAP series. See, your question is crystal clear. You straight away want to know what about this second anesthesiologist behavior. See, the second anesthesiologist should be always supportive, at least at that particular point of time. At least at that particular point of time. It is not a fault-finding mission at that particular moment. So he has to be supportive, one. Number two, he need not be worried about this court of law because he is coming there at the instance of, at the request of the primary anesthesiologist. So he is coming as good Samaritan. He is a friend who has come there to help. It is not just calling a surgeon, calling a urologist in case of ureteric injury. He is responsible. But the second anesthetist who has come there to support. So legally, he is not responsible, but morally, he is responsible to support his colleague. So the primary anesthesiologist also should call a person who is reasonably senior, who can fall in line with him and who will be really supporting to him.
Right, sir. So that's absolutely nicely reinforced. And sir, about the reasonable standards of medical care.
Yeah, that reasonable standards of medical care, Dr. Anjali Bure Madam has clearly mentioned. First, you have to check whether the nursing home is registered because now Clinical Establishment Act is in vogue. So we have to check whether it is there. Then a person who is calling as the surgeon, whether he is reasonably qualified. And three, whether the nursing home is having the infrastructure. Because as you mentioned, this cardiac arrest, I want to say, we have to expect the unexpected. We think this spinal anesthesia is harmless. So if suppose the cardiac arrest happens, you may be using drugs like atropine, adrenaline and noradrenaline. So there is every chance the patient can go to ventricular tachycardia. At that time, defibrillator is available. In my considerable years of experience, I feel even though the nursing home is fully equipped, majority of the nursing homes are having a defibrillator, especially inside the operation theatre. In district headquarters and the taluk headquarters areas, it is happening. So the reasonable standards of medical care is adequate qualification, reasonable experience, and that reasonable infrastructure. If it is not available, it is very difficult for us to defend in the court of law.
Dr. Arun, would you like to add to something to this?
Thank you, Dr. Naveen. I think Dr. Anjali and others have very nicely elaborated the first two questions. I had read somewhere that there are 4 basic commandments of safe clinical practice. I think the first and foremost thing that we talk about is the first and foremost thing is competence. And when we talk about competence, it's about reasonable skills and reasonable knowledge about your subject. That simply means that we need to follow our guidelines and our standard operating protocols. The other things which probably we'll discuss during the rest of the discussion, but I'll just enumerate. I think a good consent, good documentation, good communication, and a compassionate care. These are other important commandments which would be helpful in case we come across such a devastating situation where there is a death on the table or death during the perioperative procedure. Thank you.
No, sir. Often
we have a question here, sir. I'd like to intervene. one of the participants has raised a question in the question box that what is the medico-legal implication of giving anesthesia to MS Ayurveda who has a valid degree?
Madam, I wish to answer this. This
Yes,
is
sir.
happening. This is happening only in Maharashtra because I have traveled the length and breadth of Maharashtra, and
Yes,
many
sir.
people are having the qualified degree. Even they say MBBS, Ayurveda bachelor degree and MS allopathic degree. But here,
Right.
what I want to infer, see, whenever we are in doubt, at least we have to save our skin first. So
Right,
the
sir.
suggestion I have made, see, if the postgraduate qualification is in the allopathic field, legally it is easy to defend. If the postgraduate qualification is MS Ayurveda, then we can say you call Ayurveda anesthesiologist. Not
Right, sir.
as that is always because routinely in Maharashtra they are asking the Ayurvedic surgeons are doing hemorrhoidectomy, they are calling.
Right, sir.
Better to avoid.
Preeti, I'd like to add on here to what Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram has said.
Yes,
That
sir.
as a policy matter, sir, you are absolutely right that we should not give anesthesia to MS Ayurveda surgeons, as well as if we are in a position of employment, like an anesthesiologist has a nursing home or a hospital, he should avoid employing MS Ayurveda surgeon also. And Dr. Preeti, there is another thing which is Dr. Lalit has said.
Yes,
that
sir.
one should be having rapport with the colleagues.
Yes, sir.
Want to call, and if no rapport, other will not respond or come for help.
So that underlines the importance of good networking among each other so that we have rapport with each other and we can defend and help out. So there's one more question from Dr.
That will take up during the consent part.
All right, sir.
Right.
We'll continue.
Naveen sir, can I ask you one question?
Okay.
So I mean to say that when there is mishap, there is a tendency to avoid being present during the time to help the other anesthetist. So what is the take on this?
See, a friend in if that sums up. If the friend does not turns up in need, then he's not your friend. So Dr. Lalit has absolutely rightly said that first of all, if somebody calls you, you should be also going to help them.
Yeah.
And only if you are calling, then others will come. It's as simple as that. So there are no medical legal implications of helping your colleagues because you are going once the complication has occurred. And there is absolutely no harm. You should go and help your. See, if in a department something happens on a table, other consultants also go on that particular table, right? The primary responsibility of that of the consultant. And at times when the resuscitation is going on, after half an hour, we say that person, please go and have a glass of water. Because his adrenaline would have been secreted. He would be under tremendous stress. So we have to calm his or her nerves also and go to washroom, have a glass of water, and then come back. And in the meantime, we'll take care. Similarly, we have to help our friends. And Dr. Baljit Singh, sir.
Yeah.
You, me, Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram, we are in shoots and we often receive call. Yes, sir, such a such complication has occurred. Notes kya dalne? What we have to put in the notes so that we are not able to miss anything. And yes, everybody knows that documentation is important. And so my straightforward question is that we keep on teaching our postgraduates, okay, do proper PAC, do put and proper anesthesia notes, put the shifting notes and post-op advice. Does that changes in private practice, sir? And what is your message about importance of routine documentation? Because what I felt is people just like 3 lines. Well, I'm not saying everybody, but majority. Aseptic precautions, informed consent, final given with this much gauge needle, this much drug, intraoperative course uneventful, patient shifted to recovery room at this time. Vitals and all those sheets are empty. And then certainly some may lose the habit of putting down the notes. So please, if you can highlight the importance of documentation and the routine habit of it. Dr. Baljit Singh, sir, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Naveen. First of all, thanks for having me included among the galaxy of people who are sitting here with a lot of experience and well-known figures. Thank you so much for that. Okay, coming back to the question, you see, documentation has been always important, and it's nothing more. It's not at the moment, in the present scenario, it's much, much more important than it ever has been. The reason being that in case we have documented something, let's starting with the PAC of a patient. See, quite often it's been seen that patient has come for routine surgery. He doesn't know that he's diabetic, and when the tests are done, blood sugar is going somewhere near 300. Patient doesn't know anything, or he's found to be hypertensive, and or there are other underlying diseases which a patient may not be very, very clear, or some consultation is required. As a patient, you hear a murmur, and you send the patient to a cardiologist for further opinion. Echo is done, and you find that there is evidence of some cardiac disease, some coronary artery disease. So documenting all this will protect you from any harm that may occur subsequently to the patient. I mean, I don't mean that patient should get harmed, but then documentation is something that's going to protect you. And the whole purpose of documentation is communicating on the paper or as to what are your observations with regard to the patient before he is taken off a surgery. Now, let's take the example of a patient who has been having a binge drinking. He is full stomach. After the drinking, he had a brawl and he stabbed by someone. He comes to the hospital. Now, here in case you document that, yes, the patient had come to the hospital with these kind of things. He was full stomach and he was heavily under the influence of alcohol. He's been a smoker and all that. So if, just like the case that you're saying that the patient had cardiac arrest, I think this kind of documentation in the pre-operative period is something that's going to matter a lot with regard to the safety of the anesthesiologist. And it's not just a documentation. Documentation is something routine. We check the patient, we check the blood pressure, we check the pulse, we check the objective assessment in the form of investigations, we check everything. And it's another important thing about the documentation is documentation of the communication. Communication, what communication? I mean, you explain it to the patient, you can look, this is the problem, you need surgery immediately in case it's an emergency surgery, or if it's a routine surgery, well, you can explain it to the patient. You win over the patient's confidence. One of the purpose of PAC, of course, is that the patient becomes familiar with the doctor. He's more at ease. He doesn't have high level of anxiety. So in this particular case, documentation of the communication, what all you have talked to the patient, what risk you have explained to the patient is important. And not only there, that documentation of the communication that has taken place between the anesthesiologist and the patient, it is communication or documentation also. Now, what's that? Documentation of communication is that you have documented whatever you have discussed with the patient, you have informed him, he had any queries, you have given all the answers, and you have put it, yes, this is what it is. Now, communication or documentation is something else. Is that, whatever you have documented, it is communicated to the patient. Okay, I've written this, that I've explained you this thing. You are fully aware of the risks of surgery, but since surgery is urgent, this has to be undertaken. So that's what is the communication of the documentation. Now, apart from this, whatever is documented is kind of a easy record of the patient. It's a brief of the patient. Let's say you have done the PAC of a patient in the evening before, and in the morning there is another colleague who has come there. I mean, there's some change of guard, and there is somebody else. If the documentation is complete and is comprehensive, he gets a very comprehensive view. The anesthesiologist in the morning gets a very comprehensive view as to what he is going to face. So documentation is the kind of record which is absolutely integral, which is absolutely essential, and I think it's a very, very important document before the patient is taken off for surgery. Now here I would also like to add, and it is the documentation that is going to save the anesthesiologist just in case something happens. So the documentation should be taken very seriously. It's not just documenting, as you are saying, the spinal given with this needle and all that. So everything that has been done should also should be mentioned. You know, all the parameters of the physiological parameters of the patient, and if it's an intraoperative case, during the intraoperative period, then of course what all you are monitoring. In case you are monitoring all that is, I mean, minimum mandatory requirement for the patient. So if you are documenting the monitoring that you have done as per the standards required, also, you know, ASA grading again, that again is done in the pre-operative period. So if you have graded the patient very well, if the patient has some underlying disease, you grade the patient accordingly. Then of course the risk to the patient is explained and it is documented. So I believe that documentation is something which is absolutely essential in the present day, and it is this thing that is going to save the anesthesiologist from further harm in the court of law.
Thank you, sir. And I'll come to Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram also on that. But there are a few participants who have raised hands. So I'll allow our respected Dr. Balveer Chavda, sir. Sir, please go ahead and you are allowed to express, sir. Dr. Chavda, sir. Dr. Madhusudan Pal and Dr. Vipul Shah. You all are allowed to express yourself. Dr. Chavda, sir, please go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. This patient you have seen is elective surgery. This means he must be having a properly assessed by the anesthesiologist, and this miss has occurred and that is not at the place. Now, question is that our teaching is that we make all our steps to resuscitate, and the anesthetist which is there, he is under tremendous stress because it's an elective procedure and he is taken for the spinal or the anesthesia also. So in that case, the main aim is at the moment was to resuscitate. But I think as being a medical legal point of also, then the documentation has to be done. There is no doubt about it. But the surgeon has not started the case at the moment. So we have got the surgeon also available. We have got he has called the physician also. So I think the physician and the other surgeon colleague, first aim is to resuscitate because it's an elective procedure. And the mishap has occurred, and the aim is to resuscitate as all efforts will be made to make resuscitate whatever the method is there, and the documentation, of course, has to be done subsequently also. Other point, I would like to say that this elective procedure, patient attendant are also waiting outside. What about the communication of the attendant that what is being happened to patient and what we are doing for the patient also? Because ultimately the patient attendant will be again making a human cry, and they'll say it is a fault on the part of the anesthetist or something else. So I think the attendant also has to take in confidence and then to tell him that all effort has been made to resuscitate him. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So nice of you. Dr. Madhusudan Pal.
Can we take another question?
Yeah, in the meantime, Dr. Madhusudan Pal and Dr. Vipul Shah, you can also express yourself. Dr. Priyanka, please go ahead.
There is, they have it. Is printed anesthesia consent mentioning all complications in printed form signed by the patient is attendant valid in court?
Dr. Parekh, I'll request you to please take the questions pertaining to the consent. Dr. Parekh, sir, please.
Can't hear. Can't hear.
Sir, I'll repeat.
Yeah.
There are a few questions regarding consent.
Yeah.
So it is like, sir, whether the printed consent mentioning all complications in printed form signed by the patient, is it valid in the court? And there's another extension to it that once a patient, a doctor has, anesthesia has explained high risk consent, even so, and got declaration signed, once the case goes wrong and the patient party begins to deny that I did not understand and whatever was given to me, I just signed. So what is your say on this, sir?
Shall I, Dr. Naveen? Dr. Parekh sir is not online.
Dr. Parekh, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir, he's online, sir.
Hello.
Sir,
Hello, sir.
I hope you have understood the question, sir.
Yes, I understood.
Yeah, please go ahead, sir.
Yes. Now, the thing is, every patient is different.
Sir, your audio is less. Can you slightly increase or come near the mic, sir?
Okay. Now,
A bit better, sir. Please go ahead.
okay. So, because every patient is different,
Therefore, the consent form also has to be different for every patient. So it cannot be totally pre-printed for everyone, because you have to mention everything pertaining to that patient, and every patient has a different risk profile depending upon what surgery he is going on and what is his comorbidities and other things. So,
sir, please increase your volume.
Hello. So
please increase your volume of the.
Hello.
Sir,
Yes,
you're audible, but your volume is very low.
I have turned it to maximum volume.
Maybe you could come closer, sir.
Now is it okay?
It's a bit better, sir.
Better.
If you have got volume control in your earphone, use it.
Yes, sir.
No, I have only in my phone, because unfortunately I am not at home right now.
Okay, sir. Okay, please go ahead, sir. Please go ahead.
So I was saying that a pre-printed consent will not do, because that doesn't give an impression that a proper consent has been taken. That's like routine, like madam just said that I just signed because I was told. That gives that impression. So a consent will be partly printed and partly individualized. Means patient particulars have to be individualized. There is no doubt about it. But patients' comorbidities are there. They also have to be individualized and mention that patient is suffering from these things. What surgery is going to undergo, that also has to be mentioned. And what type of anesthesia is to be given. So many things that they cannot be printed. They have to be individualized for every person. Then what information we are giving. So there are two things. What information you want to give and what the patient wants to know. Both the things have to be there. So maybe what information you want to give is same for all the patients. But what patient wants to know is always different for every patient. So obviously you cannot have a single pre-printed form for everybody. So this consent has to be individualized.
Right, sir. Thank you. So also there's another question. I'll combine two of them again. For consent, is a high-risk consent enough in a patient who may die on the table also? Like, certain patients are very high risk, wherein we say that, there's a DOT consent, death on table consent. So is there any such consent which is valid that we say that there can be death on the table, and can we defend just by saying that we told you so?
See, one thing I must mention, that whatever documentation is okay, but ultimately it will rest upon whether the communication was made or not. So just like you said, that patient says that I signed just because I was told to sign. So the remedy is that the consent should be in the language that the patient understands. Because without proper communication, there cannot be any consent. And without the person understanding the language, there cannot be any communication.
So another question, sir, should the consent, the written consent, be in patient's own handwriting?
No need to be in his own handwriting, but it should be preferably in his own language, which he can understand and read. And then he can sign under that. He need not sign everything, but he should know that language. And if he does not know, then somebody has to be involved to translate, and that translator's particulars have to be mentioned there, that who translated and who told in his own language, because he has to understand that, otherwise there is no communication at all. So the crux of the matter is whether it was communicated or not. Not that he has signed, that is okay for presenting. But if he says I was not told and it is in English or somebody did not translate, then you have to prove it, because onus is on us to prove that yes, we had properly told him. So even if there is a possibility of death, you have to tell him. Even in elective cases, see, we are not supposed to tell everybody that there is a death. We know there is a rare chance of death. So we are not telling everybody. But suppose a patient pointedly asks, sir, is there any chance that I can die during anesthesia? And you say, no, there is no chance. That's not valid. So that is the thing.
All right, sir. Also, sir, like patients coming for elective surgery, especially in private setup scenarios. Suppose patient lands up to a surgeon and you are the anesthetist and there's uncontrolled hypertension in the patient. So shall we postpone the case, or we explain high risk and take up that patient
No,
for a
if
suppose say elective hernioplasty?
If the surgery is elective, there is no question of taking it without optimizing.
Right, sir.
Because it is elective, it can wait any number of days and patient has to be optimized. And when you are satisfied that yes, it is optimal controlled, then only you go ahead.
So in that
Otherwise, you can't
scenario,
justify.
yeah. So in that scenario, basically no high risk. It does not hold valid.
No. High risk means you have to mention the reason why it is high risk and you have to explain to the patient that you are suffering from these things. That's why it is high risk and this complication can take place. Just for a ASA1, you cannot take a high risk consent.
Right.
And
sir.
for elective also no high risk consent because it is a elective surgery. Of course, if it is a comorbidity is indicated even then because it cannot be optimized beyond certain limit always. So if there are comorbidities, then even for elective, we'll take a high risk consent. But without optimizing, you can't take high risk consent and just go ahead.
Right, sir. So before I invite Dr. Arun, Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram, sir, a few comments from your side.
Now, as Dr. Parag sir has clearly mentioned and Baljit also said, I want to comprehensively, I want to say, in documentation process, it is first 5 points we have to remember: communication, documentation, communication of the documentation, documentation of the communication, preservation of documentation. So these 5 are important. And in as Dr. Parag sir mentioned, the printed consent forms will not be valid as routinely the patient's attenders say, just because we have asked to sign, we have signed. This is just like when we are downloading any app, we will say, I agree, without reading anything. So the same logic they also apply there. So it should be individualized and it should be in the local language. So it should be signed by both the parties, both anesthesiologist and the patient. Routinely what I have seen, only patients attenders are signing and patients are signing. But consent is to be signed by both the parties. That is anesthesiologist and the patient with 2 witness preferably. That's what I want to say.
Right, thank you. Arun, I'll come to you. Dr. Madhusudan Pal, Dr. Vipul Shah, you are allowed to express. Please go ahead. Dr. Nitu Jain, Dr. Parshuram, and Professor Dr. Vittal. If
Hello.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, Dr. Madhusudan Pal, go ahead, please.
Yeah, sir. In the peripheral part of the India where we have worked, we have found we know that we have to follow this protocol. In spite of following all the protocols, we are facing some nuisance. Nuisance. Why? How to face these nuisances and how to, in spite of our no fault.
A nuisance you mean to say by public or by the attendants?
By the attendants.
Yeah, well, I'll take up that question absolutely clearly, loud and clearly as a full-fledged topic. Just wait for 5 minutes or so. Dr. Vipul,
Okay.
please.
Hello.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Nowadays, with the help of the phone, all high-risk patients' consent, which we explain to the relatives before entering to the OT, is to be recorded in our phone, whether it is valid legally in the court or not.
Dr. Aman Sharma, Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram, Dr. Parekh. Consent on the phone.
Consent recorded over phone, is it there?
Not consent on phone. Whatever we explain to the patient regarding the high risk or death on table, so many times what happens, relatives say we are not told about this thing.
That's right.
So in that case, if we have recorded our conversation in our phone, and suppose something goes wrong, so in the case of legal matter, this recording is valid or not valid?
He's talking about video consents.
I know that. No.
Yeah.
He is not asking for video consent. He is asking about audio consent. See, this may psychologically traumatize the attenders who already it is recorded. But if you want to record it over phone, you have to inform the people that you are recording the conversation. Because recording the conversation is an offense. So you have to inform. Then court will not take it as a evidence. But court will listen to it. At least you can mention it in the written affidavit, that is counter affidavit. You can mention even it was recorded on phone. with the attendant's consent. So, but for the court, everything is written documentation. It should be in the form of a signed document. And when he is signing it in the handwriting, that is the reason why we say printed consent form is not valid. Once it is written in their own language, and especially you can write and you can ask the patients or the attendants also to write in their own language. So that is a safety. By recording is added safety. It will not be taken as a evidence in the court of law.
Meenakshi sir, I have a addition to this. Suppose if I take a video consent after due information to the attendant, suppose regarding some high risk case, and then I add to my documentation part also where the attendant signs that yes, even the same thing has been recorded on a video with my due consent. So will it hold well in the court then?
Yes, 100%. If it is explained video consent, it will hold good.
So I think that's a good idea for all of us to imbibe, especially those in private practice.
No, that is the reason why the corporate hospitals are having a room with the CCTV.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And they record, but with the consent only they are entering. See, now it is a pity that instead of concentrating on the case, now we have to concentrate on this extra academic problem also.
Exactly, sir. These extra.
Preeti, Dr. Vipul Shah was saying, even audio or video recording on the phone, sir, because phones have got cameras also and video is also there.
Sir, audio, sir, told that audio cannot be really taken as an evidence, but yes, it will give some idea. But if after information it is there, then yes.
There is slightly what I'm like to add here. Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram, sir, phones have got video recording also. The recording is, instead of being done by CCTV, is being done by on your phone.
Yes, sir.
Getting my
Yes,
Dr. Sundaram, sir.
Which one?
Nowadays, Dr. Naveen
attendants and the doctor, anesthesiologist, they are sitting in a room. In private practice, maybe in some nursing home, there will not be a CCTV in that particular room.
Yes.
But there is a mobile phone, and the doctor explains that, okay, whatever I am communicating to you is being recorded on this phone, because phones also have got wide angle and video recording. So that video recording will be of your use in.
Yes, sir. I say video recording is always useful either through CCTV or phone.
Right. So that answers Dr. Vipul Shah's question. Dr. Badresh Shah, please go ahead.
Good evening, sir, and good evening, panelists. I want to ask one question and I want to add one thing regarding documentation. My question is, so many times now in medical legal era, physician advise so many investigation during cardiopulmonary assessment. Now, if patient or patient relatives doesn't want to do that investigation and they say that we want to do the surgery without these investigations, so if we take the consent that patient's relatives are not ready for that particular investigation, then is this the valid or protective for us or not? My question is. Suppose physician write for minimum things, they write the 2D echo so many times, and poor patient doesn't want to go for 2D echo. At that time, can we give the anesthesia or not?
Arun, would you like to take that, or Dr.
Dr. Naveen, to whom this question goes?
This question goes to Dr. Arun Sharma and Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram. Arun, first you.
Dr. Naveen, I think when we are, I've worked in either stage. I've worked in the OTs and I've been actively involved in intensive care. I've realized that when we are working in a clinical area, we are supposed to take decisions based upon our clinical expertise. We are not supposed to do social service. So if you think an investigation is required and it's an elective surgery, then that investigation has to be done. You cannot escape from the fact that a basic investigation was not done because the relative refused for it.
I concur with the views of Dr. Anil Sharma. You have to go ahead with the investigation, especially if you have called for a physician opinion, whether necessarily or unnecessarily, and if somebody asks for it, then you cannot override the ruling. You cannot overrule that. Definitely it should be done. And a patient's refusal is not a valid ground in the court of law. If the patient refuses investigation, we have to refuse anesthesia.
Right. So, Dr. Badresh, that answers your question. Now, what is the question comment you want to make?
Now, I want to add one thing for documentation and for the benefit of all. I have done a certification course from the Symbiosis Pune regarding for medico legal. And one most important thing is when on-table death occurred, then we don't have to submit all documents immediately to the police or to the officers. We have 24 hours time. Initially, we have to give only later that what happened and for postmortem initial paper, but our whole sheet or whole documentation should not be submitted immediately. Please give this, check this paper with your seniors or friends with that and or submit after 24 hours. This is the most important point. Should not
Shall I
submit
intervene?
immediately. Yes, sir.
Shall I intervene? See, I have talked to two superintendent of police yesterday for this submission of the documentation. Now I want to make it clear, there is no time in a private setup. I repeat, in a private setup, there is no time for submitting the case sheet. In the government setup, they will ask the resident medical officer or the dean or the hospital institution head to submit the documents, and they will wait even for days together. But in private, please don't take that 24 hours time or some time is available, because it depends upon the investigation officer's decision. The IO's decision plays a major role. The IO can seize the case sheet because 91 CRPC, he can seize the case sheet because he will say allowing time may lead to alteration in the case sheet. Because routinely what doctors say, when there is a mishap, we may not be writing the case sheet. So we will be writing the case sheet. So what I want to say, if the second anesthesiologist is there, he should be help in documenting, or before coming out of the theater, you finish up the case sheet work and don't think that we have time. It depends upon the IO again. If the inspector is known to you, then he is the IO, he can give time. So I again and again, I repeatedly asked the superintendent of police, see, as things behave necessarily, naturally, by natural justice, they have to give time. But again, it depends upon the IO, and we know how many ways the inspector can be influenced. So always, before we are coming out, be ready with the case sheet. That is better.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Meenakshi, sir.
Dr. Badreshta, I 100% concur with Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram, sir. You have tried to complete your notes in the OT itself. Because
right, sir,
anytime they can ask, please give the documents. The other thing is that you should have a record of that also with you. If you can, if you can't get it photostat, that's fine, but you can easily scan it in your phone and keep a copy of that. And please do number the pages which you are submitting to the IO. Suppose 90 pages or 60 pages or 10 pages, you please number, so that tomorrow somebody may not say that it was not 10 pages, it was, you have submitted only 9 pages. And your 10th page may be as important as the first 9 pages. So please number the pages as you submitted to them. And if possible, always have a copy of that photostat or a soft copy scanned in your mobile phone. And finally to Dr. Parshuram and Dr. Neetu Jain, if you want to express, please go ahead. And I'll request Dr. Preeti to please keep a tab on the chat box also. Dr. Neetu Jain, please.
Good evening. Good evening, sir. I am Dr. Parshuram speaking. Sir, if a case is posted for surgery today and for some reasons it is postponed for next 2-3 days, or we take the consent again, or the consent is valid for how many days or for 24 hours, sir? Can I get some clarification?
Arun?
Naveen, I think the simple corollary is that if there is a change in the clinical status, if you're doing getting the anesthetic done after, let's say, 3 days, I would say conduct a basic pre-anesthetic checkup again. If there is any change in the clinical status, if you think the parameters that were earlier mentioned or explained, there is any change, you can take an additional consent. See, there's nothing wrong in additional documentation. Whatever you document is going to come handy in case situation goes out of control. The biggest limiting factor is that, if the court admits that if there are things written in black and white, this means the doctor would have spent time with the patient in trying to explain. So the entire essence of a good consent is a discussion.
Okay.
In fact,
but in our hospital, sir, there is a routine practice from nursing department. If a patient is posted for today and surgery is not happened for that particular day, and they will remove the consent form, everything, and they will keep a new one. and they ask us to sign it again, even if there is no change in the patient condition. When the same question is asked, they tell it is NABH recommendation, something they will tell, but those things are not found in NABH books.
Our hospital is both an NABH and JCI accredited hospital. We've not come across this practice. So I think this is a practice which is inherent to your own hospital. My suggestion would be, if there is a change in the status, please do it again. Otherwise, just document that there's no change and the same consent form would be valid for the surgery which happens at a later date.
But, Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
So there are more questions regarding consent here that I would like to put across.
Dr. Naveen, can I add something?
Yes. This question needs more deliberation. Dr. Meshina, please.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, as was said that the case was postponed because of some reason. So there is a situation which needs to be documented. And the next time when you are again taking the case, you have to continue the documentation from where you have stopped. You cannot abruptly close one chapter, or if patient is discharged and again come for the next time, then different scenario. But
no, the same admission. Same admission, sir.
Taking consent again is better because the situation has changed. Or for the cause the case was postponed, whether that was rectified or not. It is a very important document.
Dr. Parshuram, I agree with Dr. Meshina, sir.
Okay, sir.
The consent should be taken on the day of the surgery. And because earlier date was put, suppose you have taken consent on 1st of July and the surgery is done on 4th of July.
Okay, sir.
So you may have documented that, okay, these changes have occurred or nothing has changed. You have put your signature and the attendant has also, or the patient has also put the signature. That's a very wise practice, Dr. Parekh and Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram. If you differ, otherwise, if on the day of the surgery, I think there is no harm in taking a fresh consent, putting the date of that particular day on which the surgery is being done. That document.
I concur.
Thank you, sir. So, so moral of story is, please take consent again on the day of surgery. Dr. Neetu Jain, Dr. Upal Kabadia, then I'll hand over to Dr. Preeti and Dr. Priyanka.
Yeah, good evening.
One with the request of panelists with folded hands. I know this is going to be a very, very stormy session and lots of questions will come up. And attention span of our delegates is not that much. So if we are not able to cover up all the questions today, we will come back to you on next Tuesday. So I'll request all the panelists to please, let's see how the things move on, because I see there are lots of questions coming up. So with folded hands, I request you. Dr. Neetu Jain, quickly, and then Dr. Upal Kabadia.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Dr. Neetu Jain. I just want to ask, these days in private practice, we are getting cosmetic surgery cases, and the youngsters, 20 to 25 years old, girls and boys, they come for cosmetic surgeries and they do not tell their parents when they come, and they come alone in the hospital to get the surgeries done. So we do not have any witness, we do not have any relative with them. So at that time, who should sign on consent as relative or witness?
So before you assign this question, I'll just add on two more aspects to it, because that is the question that was there, that if no attendant or a minor attendant or friends are standing outside, like ma'am said, that youngsters are coming in, suppose with a friend, they come in and say, okay, I'll get this done. Or how about the witness to the consent in such cases? Who becomes the third party as a witness? Should it be the hospital staff or the relative? Because generally we say that the witness should not be known to both parties. So how is that possible? So, sir, please.
Parekh, sir, please.
Yes, sir. Number one thing, it's not advisable to subject a patient to surgery without any proper attendance. Because in case of mix-up, with whom do you communicate? Nobody responsible. So this type of situation should be avoided first of all. And we should always ask for a proper person who is going to be legally responsible for that person. We should accompany the patient. Otherwise, it is very difficult later on to defend ourselves if something goes wrong with these people. Why should if they don't want to inform, then you have to refuse. You are taking the risk if you are not involved in a proper attendant or a relative in that thing. So because you will be asked to explain that, why did you not call, and you can't say that because patient wanted surgery without informing the So we got it. So that will not be justified. That is my opinion about it.
Right, sir. So, Dr. Rupal Kabadia, please.
Sir, I wanted to add something regarding the recording as the evidence for the consent. Currently, I am pursuing medical law, diploma in medical law. And what we are following in consent is UK standard. That is, we don't explain each and everything to the patient. Like that in US, they open up the book in front of the patients and give complete details. But we provide only relevant details. So if you are 100% sure that you have covered each and every point, then only you should give the recording. Otherwise, it is not recommended because something missing on our part will go against us.
Yes, is it dual-edged sword?
Yes. So, when someone is 100% sure that he has covered each and everything, then only recording should be taken as a defensive or evidence.
Actually, I would like to add one point. It is mandatory for transplant actually to do the video consenting. So there you cannot skip it, but for other purposes, keep here because people don't understand in our country the medical jargon, the medical terminologies. So you have to explain them everything in their language and their terminology. So everything cannot be explained.
Yes,
like you said, American system, they will run a video, they'll run a half an hour their session and everything. But we are mostly following the British system.
Yeah, British system.
May I add something?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
No, see, in the beginning I said the information is two types. One that I want to convey to the patient and one that is patient wants to know. So,
yes,
whether you have passed the entire information or not is not about whether you have passed on the relevant information or not. And in addition, whether you have answered all the questions by the patient, honestly or not. That is the thing. If that is done, then there is no harm in recording and presenting it as there. Because court also says that you are, court also has said that you are not supposed to enumerate each and every complication that is possible.
Yes.
So
one more point.
So how about complication regarding rare things like malignant hyperthermia? Somebody has said, because right now you said that we are not supposed to enumerate each and everything.
We are not going to. Yes, that we are not going to explain in every case, and that may happen.
Right, ma'am. Also, ma'am, one more thing, sir, one more thing here. In addition to what we are discussing right now, that suppose when somebody has written that suppose there's an 80-year-old patient and the surgeon explained everything, and you talk to the attendants, and then the surgeon says that the patient has already understood and can sign himself or herself. So why do you need attendants to sign the consent?
One more point. Many places still they are not taking separate anesthesia consent. This is mandatory that anesthesia consent has to be separate and signed separately. There is no role of surgeon in that. So it is a individual entity. And as Dr. Parak sir said, I would like to add one more point. When you are telling the treatment, telling the patient treatment, you have to also tell option. If there is any other option of treatment, you have to mention it in that way.
Right, sir. So my question was, can the patient herself or himself sign the consent, and when there are no relatives available?
Dr. Preeti, I think a simple answer to this question would be the patient has, if the patient is an adult, competent adult, then the signatures of the patients are important. At the same time, if there's the surgery or an anesthetic has an implication that the patient is going to require post-operative care.
Yes, sir. Suppose there's a high-risk scenario.
Correct. So in that case, I think I would agree with Dr. Parak, sir, when he says you need to have a relative who should be there to take care of him in the post-operative scenario, even if there is no complication. The patient has to be sent home safely.
Right, sir.
There would be a period of observation, let's say after a daycare anesthesia. So that means, this simply means that the presence of an attendant as a witness and also as a person who can take care of the person is important. The challenge which we had because of the initial question was a dilemma between the risk of confidentiality versus the question which was asked was the cosmetic surgery. The challenge, the dilemma is because there you have a risk of breach in confidentiality. But then at that point in time, it's an assessment which is to be done between the surgeon, anesthesiologist, and the patient. In an ideal scenario, it's better that you have a relative who takes care of the patient.
Sir. So also regarding techniques, like we just discussed that, we can open a standard textbook, show it to the patients to say that it is the standard of care. How about techniques? Dr. Naresh Paliwal, we all know him for segmental spinal anesthesia techniques. So he has asked for any technique to be used. Does that need to be in the standard textbook only? Or other studies and evidences from the research articles can be used in case of mishaps?
It's from if the literature is from an indexed journal,
right, sir,
a peer-reviewed journal, the evidence would stand true. However, if it's an isolated anecdote from any other journal, it may not have that important.
Right, sir. Thank you.
So,
There is one more thing I want to ask.
Priyanka, you will take up the questions as per the flow. Arun.
Okay, sir.
So we have highlighted the importance of consent. Now, there was a scenario in which there was an arrest after spinal or after reduction of anesthesia. A fellow colleague, anesthesiologist colleague has come. A physician has also come. They have tried to help. As per Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram highlighted, reasonable level of medical care has also been extended. And simultaneously, somebody is helping with the documentation also, checking with the consent also, everything is right. In spite of the best efforts, clinical as well as administrative as well as documentation, we are not able to resuscitate the patient. Can you highlight the do's and don'ts? Okay, these are the things which all anesthesiologists must do in such a, I don't think this should happen to anybody, but an unfortunate scenario. And these are the things which should not be done at all. So can you highlight that?
Thank you, Dr. Navi. Before I answer this question, I had read somewhere, there was a statement which was put forward by Professor Etkinhead in Journal of Anesthesia. And he'd written, the focus of training in anesthesia is concerned with the avoidance of disasters rather than the management of aftermath. I think what is important for us is to understand the do's and don'ts, because in case such an adverse event happens, what should be done and what should not be done. We've talked about the fact that the most important thing is we should not panic. We should ask for help. Some of you would be aware about the recent judgment, Parikshit Dalal versus Santosh Hospital, where a glaring statement was made in the order. It said the gynecologist had come out after the patient expired and she said, look, I haven't even touched your wife. I would say that's a loose statement. So when such an incident happens, we need to stick together as a team. As an anesthesiologist, I should not expect the surgeon to go out and talk to the family. We should go there as a team. So the senior anesthesiologist, the surgeon, the hospital administration, maybe the nursing in charge of the operation theater, all these people should go out and talk to the family. While this is happening, somebody should take care of the documentation which we've elaborated, because what is written at this point becomes a legal document, and tampering with the document is considered as one of the major adverse situations by the courts whenever they are deciding upon a case. So do not tamper with the documents. Breaking bad news, that's one of the most difficult part, which we anesthesiologists are not used to. We are happy working within the confines of our four walls. And when you're talking to the family, two important things: compassion and empathy. Apologize to the family if that is required. Apology doesn't mean that it's an admission of guilt. You need to be ready to face their anger, denial, stress. The reactions would come. You should not react to that. The other important thing is family may just want to see the dead body. You need to create this safe and clear, comfortable environment for them to visit the patient in the aftermath of a failed resuscitation. Do not clean up the operation theater. Leave the ampules, drugs, airway equipments as they were, because in case the family is influential, they'll probably immediately contact the police person who will come to the operation theater and they will try to collect the records. So do not fudge up with the OT environment. I'd also read somewhere, and it clearly says that in case there are any expired drugs in the operation theater, for your own safety, you should take them away. That's very important. Once you've briefed the family, get ready for the adverse reaction. So if you anticipate that violence can occur, alert your security team, inform the police by yourself, inform the family that a post-mortem may be required. And the most important thing, ensure that you are safe, because your safety would be paramount in such a situation, because nobody can predict what a mob can do in this situation.
Arun, you have raised certain important points, and I'd like to add on here. While the resuscitation was going on, it at times, I'm not saying always, good to call in the attendants in the OT. I have seen for myself that, okay, this thing has occurred, and this is the team of doctors which is trying to do the best of the things. And it really works. They are seeing that, okay, there are 5 doctors inside, there is a monitor, there is a things, and the resuscitation is going on, and all the doctors are trying to save my relative or attendant. Secondly, always keep a check on your sweepers and bearers. Tell them strictly. Please do not go out and tell them loose things. They will say something, and that will spoil whole of the thing. And whenever you go out, even if it is an aesthetic complication, do join, ensure that you and surgeon go together. If it is a surgical, then also you should go together. Don't say when it's a surgical complication, there is no need for you to go. No, go at that time also, and it should be, and then take the responsibility. Yes, this is even occurred. One more thing I like to add on here, especially for those who smoke. Please ensure that you have not smoked, have taken a fag before you go and explain to the attendants. They will immediately feel very, very bad that this person is, the smell of smoke is coming. The expressions on your face, that warm touch on the shoulder of the attendants, the compassion should be absolutely visible on your face. There should be water in your eyes, because and as an anesthesiologist, we really feel bad that this thing has happened. Your mobile phone should be absolutely on silent mode. If you are calling an attendant in one particular OT, chatting and laughing should not be going on in the adjoining OT, or music may not be playing. So, as you rightly said, it should be a somber environment where you feel that, okay, all these things have occurred, and the attendants, if they feel that they are trying their best to save our attendant or a relative, they will be less. I'm not saying they will be 100% satisfied, but their anger will be definitely decreased. If you are good, you should appear good also. Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram, you want to say something on that?
Yes, it is. If something happens like that, first you inform the police. Even the police people like to have that. So instead of more than alerting the hospital security guards, because we know how much we are paying for the hospital security guards in private, and I don't know how they will protect, and even they may not be that much protective as much we expect. So if you think that a mob violence will be there, call for police bandobast. That is advantages always. Then again, that sober environment, everything you said, I agree.
Dr. Katyal sir, now this is a practical scenario.
Sir, may I just add one more thing on the last one?
Dr. Preeti, I'll come to you, because yes. Dr. Katyal will take up this question, and they will take up all the questions together.
Okay.
There are a large number of relatives that are outside the hospital.
Yeah.
And there may be an indifferent surgeon also. See, because at times surgeons and anesthesiologists are good friends, but maybe Dr. Maine to surgery shuru nahi ki thi, I have not started the surgery. And there are attendants also, and there is public also, local MLA or corporation, corporate also comes in, and the police also is being called. And how some points have been highlighted, but how we should be approached, and what is the role of our own colleagues, our role of ISA and IMA in that. Dr. Katyal, please.
Good evening, Naveen. Thank you for inviting. In such a scenario, violence should be anticipated. And what I will tell you the module which we follow in Ludhiana. I will suggest everybody to become a member of IM first. And then what our Ludhiana IMA does, we have a contract with a security agency. And we have one WhatsApp group of nursing homes, and we charge per month from nursing homes to pay security agency, 3,000 to 4,000. And then nursing home, when there is such a scenario, nursing home persons write on the WhatsApp group, problem, please reach. And security persons reach within no time, within few minutes reach over there. And our IMA friends, they also start going to the place. Around on an average 30 to 40 our IMA persons reach on the site. And then IMA has hired an advocate also. Advocate also reaches the site. And payment to reach the site is given by the IMA, not by the nursing home person. It is given by the IMA. In such a scenario, what police does, police has soft corner with the person who has died, and they try to help mob mentality. And there is some pressure of local politicians also, and they try movement. I have seen many times doctors or their employees are booked under 304A. As per rule, doctor cannot be booked or arrested in the capacity of doctor without conducting an inquiry. But police does it. So that to help to rescue doctor from that situation, advocate reaches there, and doctor, this advocate confronts with the police, how can they book it? And number two, there is a Medical Protection Act also in 2019. Under this act, if there is any violence or some damage is done to the building, or doctor or any employee of the doctor is interrupted to do the routine work, the person can be penalized for 2 years imprisonment. It can be extended up to 5 years imprisonment. But most of the times it has been observed, police does not, if police books some case against the attendants, they do not apply this act. So we have to be strong. I always say, if we want to strengthen ourselves, strengthen your association, and then the situation can be managed. And this module is followed in another district in Punjab, Jalandhar also. And I think this is a very good module, and every IMA branch should follow it.
So that means, sir, in unity, we all lie secured, and association means to associate, not to dissociate. And we should use all our communication skills, maneuvers while dealing with the surgeon, attendant, because we also have our influence in the political circles and the police circles. And yes, you're absolutely very right. At that time, police wants to say, "Doctor, tule kaam karte hain, thane mein chalte hain. Okay, let's go to police station. You will be safe and secure." And they will tell to the attendants, "कि हमने doctor को arrest कर लिया. We have arrested the doctor."
And they do it actually. They do it actually on the books.
So, but on the face of it, as you are absolutely right, without a proper inquiry, I'll come to that particular question in detail. And here, at this point of time, I'll open it to all the panelists if they want to add anything related to dealing with the surgeon, attendants, public, politicians, and police. All of you can please express. And in the meantime, I'll invite, by the time you are in, Kulsaurabh and Dr. Del, you are ready to express yourself. Anybody wants to express, any panelist on this, Dr. Maheshana, sir, or anybody else?
Yeah, Dr. Naveen, can I? Sure.
Yeah, Dr. Maheshana, please, and then Dr.
As soon as some incidents happens, when the crisis happens, we should involve as many people as possible, the hospital administration, if it is there, somebody is there. And as Dr. Katyal said, your local association and your local safety network, these are happening in many states of the country. And there is a case going on in Kerala High Court. A long discussion is going on the safety of the hospital, and the court has taken a very strong view, and they have even called the Director General Police and asked the government also why this is happening and what is the solution. So that case is going on. So anybody, if you want to join in that case to strengthen that case from different states, they give their what is the situation that will help in that case. So it is my earnest request to Dr. Katyal and everybody. So whatsoever the safety mechanism we are using differently in different parts, to please join that movement. And as the time is the savior actually. As the time goes on, like Naveen said, that if the situation is in under control, you can show them, bring them to the operation theater and show what is the going on. But you have to assess actually the attendant, what are the attitude and what is the types of attendant. You have the outside also you should have people who are observing what is happening. One more point I'd like to say, you must inform police. You should not compromise if any untoward death happens in the operation theater particularly, because then it is the responsibility of police to do what they want to do. You should not come into the discussion whether postmortem is required or not. It is the job of the police to be done.
So I'll quickly come to the panelists. Now something untoward has happened in the OT. I know it's a gray area. Should we declare it in the OT or shift to the recovery room or ICU? And secondly, should we ourselves insist on postmortem? So anybody can take on this too.
Dr. Naveen.
I will like to. Yeah, Dr. Meenakshi, come on.
Yeah, because Dr. Naveen has put up two questions. But before that, I want to say what Dr. Katyal has described is a very, 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 very good model. It should be implemented everywhere. But now, most of the areas, the association may exist in papers. They may not help in crisis. So what I want to say to add that you have your own lawyer also individually. And I request all the doctors to be friends of policemen, politicians, and advocates. Routinely, these three we neglect. Even I have done that before I completed my MD. After that only I have become friends of these three. These three are vital. So please don't ignore. Now coming to this question, it is always better if you have an adjoining ICU, you can shift the patient because it is only a gray area. If there is an adjoining ICU, you can inform that the patient is in very bad shape. You can shift there and you can ventilate at that time. Instead of ventilating in the operation theater, you can do it in ICU. But most of the small nursing homes, they are directly going to their ward, their room. So in that area, it is very, very difficult. So you have to explain, you have to face the tune. And number two, Dr. Maheshan has already pointed out, even I asked two superintendents of police yesterday, we cannot insist on postmortem. We cannot request for postmortem. We cannot ask for postmortem. They are very clear. See, the investigating officer decides because without receiving a complaint, postmortem cannot be ordered. So to order a postmortem, first they require a complaint from the attendants. So till that time, the body is kept in mortuary, and only if they think it can be subjected to postmortem. And even if we are so sure that the cause of death is this, then we can write that the cause of death like that. But a postmortem would be decided by the investigating officer and not by the doctor.
Naveen sir, can I ask one question?
Please go ahead.
But Meenakshi sir, if we advise postmortem, probably we are trying to show that we are transparent.
1 minute, madam. We don't have the authority to advise postmortem. That's what I want to say. If the policeman is known to you, if they are having a good rapport, then you can say, but always it is the discretion of the IO. That's what I want to say.
Can I speak?
Yes, Dr. Bhargav.
Dr. Meenakshi, what about the peripartum mortality after cesarean? In that case, suppose there is a death after cesarean section. In that case, as far as I know, that we should offer the postmortem to the family.
There, that's what I am saying. See, you can offer, you can suggest, but what you cannot order for a postmortem. You can suggest. See, one more point, sir. In peripartum mortality, to have that maternal mortality rate, even the auditing will be done by so many agencies. But a postmortem can be ordered or requested only by the police people. That is the reason why it is called inquest. Even whenever death occurs in the hospital, only at the inquest we are doing. Even a clinical postmortem is not available here, so we cannot do that. What I want to convey, see, the postmortem will be always preferable. Even the police will also like that. Even I also like that, because as we are dealing with anesthesia, sometimes they may write traces of anesthesia gas present, traces of anesthetic drug present. So many things they will write. But I want to confirm that may help us. We don't have the authority to request for postmortem.
Right, sir. So, Arun,
Naveen, actually, what point Dr. Anjali and Dr. Bhargav has raised, telling the relatives that postmortem is suggested, a good defense for the doctor and hospital. Then they say, no, the person when he is suggesting, so he is not done something wrong. That is the point, actually.
Right.
Sir, then in that case, what about the diagnosis? I mean, if we don't have authority for the postmortem, then can we really diagnose the case? If we want to put up a diagnosis, then
Dr. Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram sir is saying, you can advise, but you cannot order.
No, I understand, sir. But suppose if we have to put the diagnosis, what do we do?
Arun, would you like to come in here?
So, Dr. Naveen, we are all very clear and we agree to the fact that the death in the operation theatre or death within 24-hour surgeries would classify as unnatural death. Second important thing, this also means we all agree on the fact that we need to inform the police. That's also true. The third part, which Dr. Meenakshi said, I think that is also true, that we can advise the family. Then once we've advised the family, once you've informed the police, I think the things start falling in place. The police would come, they would find that as an unnatural death, the cause needs to be ascertained. They would also want a postmortem examination to be conducted. If the case finishes there and then, it's fine. But if the case goes to the court of the law, there have been enough situations. I think somebody has to put their mic on mute.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So I think there have been scenarios where the courts have taken it as an adverse situation that the postmortem was not done. In fact, there's a case decision by National Commission which was decided against Mulchand Hospital. The courts were very clear. It said that denial by the family for a postmortem examination is not a good defense. They were very clear. In fact, they say that if what happens in the OT is not known to anyone, and if the postmortem examination can at least give us some idea about the cause of death. So it is always advisable that you suggest the family this is my opinion, that you always suggest a family for a postmortem examination. And not doing a postmortem examination has actually gone against the defendants, against the doctors. And this is the general opinion of the courts, whether it is the consumer forums or even the higher courts or the Supreme Court. In fact, there are...
discussed that it is not in our hands that the postmortem would be done. So just advising on our part, would that be enough in the court?
So there's another, I'll give you another example. So there was a case scenario where, which was decided in West Bengal Commission. In that case, the husband of the deceased alleged that the hospital actually hushed and released the body without getting the postmortem examination. And this means that there was something wrong. Now, the hospital, the doctors, that actually documented in their case files that the husband actually did not want a postmortem examination and that he wanted cremation as per the rituals. The case had actually reached the police station, and even the police diary had a documentation that the husband actually did not want a postmortem examination. So because of these two documentation, this went in the favor of the hospital. Similarly, the second case which I'm talking about, which was decided, and where the compensation of 1 crore was awarded to the family against the Mulchand Hospital, one of the adverse point was that the hospital or the hospital authority did not order a postmortem examination. Hence, the case went against them.
But Arun, so that means the message we want to convey to all is that it is always better to advise a postmortem.
Correct.
And majority of the scenarios, in case of unnatural death, police also won't act against getting a postmortem done. And if the attendants don't ask or immediately oppose postmortem, it has to be documented.
This has to be documented.
Right. So
and I think inform to the police also, sir,
and
that we have advised and the family.
It has to be documented and it has to be documented in both the scenarios. And final comment from Dr. Parekh. Dr. Parekh, sir, final comment.
Yes. No, the thing is, we have said that we have to inform the police. So once we inform the police, then police will take care of all these things, whether postmortem is done or not to be done. And then we are not responsible. Once the case is handed over to the police, police will take care of it. So whether the attendants are refusing or not refusing, that will all be part of the police recording.
Yes, absolutely right. And
Dr. Naveen.
Yes, please go ahead, sir.
Actually, the point means extending to the point, the body should not be handed over to the attendant without police consent.
True.
Correct.
Absolutely important point. Absolutely important point that if everything is closed, then only the body should be handed over. And before I invite Dr. Tyagi and inviting Dr. Preeti Gehlot to ask the question.
So one more, yes, in the same series that we were discussing.
Dr. Preeti, I'll invite you. And Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram has rightly said that we should have friends in politics, legal circles, and the police stations.
Right, sir.
And I must say that please visit the police stations also. The majority of the doctors don't have gone to the police station. So please go with your IMA colleagues, because otherwise you will be very fearful and apprehensive once you go first time in the police station. You will be spending all your energy on that junior most constable who is sitting outside. You should know which officer you have to talk to. So please visit your area in your city, the different police stations, so that you know if at the time of crisis you have to go to help your friend or a relative or a doctor, you are able to do that, and your fear factor is overcome. And please always carry your visiting card also with you. That okay, you are an office bearer of this city and state branch. That carries a meaning. Okay, with your logo and all those things. So,
Dr. Naveen, just in a lighter vein, when I delivered my first medico-legal issues lecture in Varanasi, I mentioned you always go to your jurisdictional police station, introduce yourself, offer a cup of tea to the inspector, because he is the IO, inspector or sub-inspector. There is no point in knowing SP or IG or anything. So you offer a cup of coffee, daily you visit the police station, because you will know the police one point. Another, if destiny decides you are arrested by the police and taken to police station, public will say, this man will be always sitting in police station, so that bad reputation will not be there.
That's absolutely right.
What I used to say.
Right.
That one was a really good point.
Dr. Tyagi and Dr. Kulswara Kaushik, please express yourself. And then I'll go to Preeti to
Actually, Naveen, doctors are afraid of all these three people.
Because I am a son of a lawyer, so I'm not afraid of the legal person, and one should be politically and sound with the police people also. Treat them; they are also your patients, and have those connections. Finally, invite to Dr. Tyagi and Dr. Kulswara Kaushik. If you want to express, please go ahead.
Sir, I'm Dr. Tyagi. I just want to add it that death in the OT is a medico-legal case. So all formalities which are to be done in a medico-legal case is to be done in this particular case. So it's not a simply we have option whether we should go for PM or not. It's a medico-legal case and everything will be decided by the investigation officer. It is decided in the case if you have not asked for the postmortem, it was a deficiency in the services, as Dr. Arun sir said recently. So only one thing I want to add is कि मुझे ऐसा लगता है sometimes we really don't know कि हुआ क्या है केस में. So ये मेरी पर्सनल ओपिनियन है कि हमें 2-3 cases और उनकी presentation we should make it perfect. If you see there is a case in Ahmedabad, pulmonary embolism after this delivery. Perfect case, everything book written. So we should, at least some of us, should prepare 3-4 cases if we have to make presentation like that particular case. So document should be prepared absolutely without any deficiency in that case. And DOT is a medico-legal case. We don't have any other options. That's what I want to submit.
Right, sir. That point is well noted and already discussed. So nice of you. Dr. Kulswarup Kaushik, quickly, please.
Sir, I'm here to listen to all the eminent and experienced teachers. I'm just gaining by this panel. So I do not have anything in addition to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kaushik. Dr. Geetika Duggal, Dell, user by the name of Dell, and Dr. Pankaj Kokare. Please go ahead.
Sir, actually, I was listening to your conversation, and my point is that if we start visiting police stations and make them friends, like them, talk to them. So actually, sir, police personnel, they it's realize that we are weak, and they start asking for favors from our hospital side. And but in my opinion, we have to be away from them. But I realized they start harassing us in that. But what I sense is I'm sharing.
It is old saying, police wale are not that they are of their own father also, and they can demand money from their own father. But that's all said and done. But the message we want to convey was that you should know who is the SHO of your nearest police station of your area. And, or two or three, so that if at all you want to have to go to the hospital, suppose your friend calls you, okay, I am in police station, please come and help me. So at least you should know where is the police station, where you have to go. That was the point we were trying to highlight. And then Dell user, if you want to say, Dr. Pankaj Kokare or Dell user, please go ahead. Dr. Pankaj, you want to say something? Okay, Arun, over to you, and then over to Preeti for taking up the questions.
Dr. Naveen, I just wanted to add one more thing. Whenever such a situation arises, the first question that comes from the relatives is "Kya hua?" And that's probably the most difficult question because the facts are not available. So my suggestion to the team who goes out to talk to the family is do not speculate. Never speculate, because if at the end of the day, the cause of death, let's say the cause of the adverse event is something different, this creates a distrust. So you should simply tell the family that there are certain events which have happened. The entire team is trying to support the patient, trying to resuscitate. And as and when the information would be available, the information would be provided to the family. That is one important point that I would wish to elaborate for whenever you are communicating with the family after an adverse event. The second question, the second suggestion is that we do have a case discussion on at a different forum where I'm involved. We have case discussion on the legal court orders. Let's say a decision which went against the anesthesiologist. So we can utilize this forum to have a discussion on those case orders, just to understand why the decision went against the doctors. And that would be a good learning experience. And that would actually help us to even modify our practice also. Thank you.
Thank you. Preeti, please, and Priyanka, carry on with the questions in the chat box, please.
So I would just like to add one thing. We've discussed a lot, like what we should do once there's a DOT or a death in the OT or somewhere. So regarding the team, which I read an article recently from NHS, which said that the team which was conducting the surgery where the DOT occurred should be put to rest for the rest of the day, even if everything went by peacefully. There can be scenarios which are not in turmoil, where you are not under some kind of pressure. It was kind of expected by everyone, and the attendants were very supportive. Still, the doctors for the rest of the day should actually retire and should ideally not be working. So that is what I read. So if there's something else to say on this, I would like to know.
Good, madam. We accept.
Thank you, sir. So, I have few questions regarding the ICU consent, sir. There are two things that I would like to ask here. So one is like Dr. Arun, probably because you're the ICU expert here, sir. Suppose patients are not willing for the consent for intubation, and then they have strictly said no, but there's a need that arises regarding intubation. So what do we do there, and what is our stand at that moment? Also, sir, another question. There was a patient on a ventilator, and sometimes, the attendants come up and say, we are kind of done with, we want to take our patient home and we'll care for him. And the patient dies on the way or at home. So what are the medico-legal implications here in these two cases?
So the first question is related to the consent. So
yes,
what I've learned working in the ICU is you need to do a lot of documentation. In fact, I would say 60 to 70% of the time is attendant management and about 30% is patient management. So if I come across a situation where the patient requires intubation and the family doesn't agree for it, so what I do or my team does is we write a detailed documentation of why this patient requires intubation. So we'll write down the respiratory rate, we'll write down the saturation, we'll write down that there's a failure of an IV.
Right.
We write down that all these indications are the reason why this patient needs to be put on the ventilator. Even after this explanation, if the relatives do not agree, we ask them to document that they do not want an intubation at this stage, and they've been made to understand the implications of a delay on intubation. So it all comes down to communication and documentation. We put a date and time over there. Let's say the family, agrees for an intubation after 4 hours. The patient's condition continues to deteriorate. So we document that the intubation consent was given 4 hours after the initial discussion. And I think that is something which would come in our favor. We do explain to them that in case the intubation is to be done as an emergency situation, then the outcome is going to be worse as compared to if the intubation was done on an elective basis. So all these discussions are actually done in an understandable language, and documentation is done in our case sheet.
Right, sir. So
this
alternatively, suppose sir, I communicated and I took that consent, and suppose I went out for a cup of coffee or to washroom break, and my JR sees the patient deteriorating and he puts in a tube. What do we do then?
So the communication has to be clear. Your entire team should be aware about what is the discussion which has happened with the family. So let's say we take DNI discussions. So we document it in bold that so that the entire team should be aware about the fact that this patient is for do not intubate or do not attempt resuscitation. So the communication has to be a closed loop communication.
Madam, shall I intervene?
Yes, sir, please.
I want to add only one thing. What you are talking is informed refusal.
Yes,
Informed consent can be in oral or written form, you can argue. But the informed refusal, it is always in written format. And informed refusal always has to be proved by the consultant. So be careful about the informed refusal. Another one, if the patient's attenders wants to take the patient home, discontinuing the treatment, always discharge against medical advice.
Right,
with 2 other witnesses. It is always against medical advice. No at request business.
Right, sir.
Dr. Parak, you wanted to say something? Please go ahead.
I have seen certain ICUs where at the time of admission only they take a consent that we agree to invasive procedure like putting on ventilator, intubation and central lines in advance only when they intubate, admit the patient to ICU. Then that consent is signed that we are ready for all these procedures.
Yeah. Dr. Bhargav, you would like to add anything to the ICU scenario?
Many of the times we also face the same situation where the intubation consent is not there, and sometimes they do not give the consent, but they don't sign also on the refusal of consent. So at that time, suppose something is for ventilation needed, we are providing with the NIV. Although NIV is not recommended in such scenario, but when consent is not there for intubation, you can apply NIV in that patient. And moreover, when patient dies on the way, if we are, as rightly said by Dr. Parak, we can discharge the patient, not discharge, we can send the patient on LAMA or DAMA. Left against medical advice. Then there will not be any medical legal implication on us.
Can I say something?
Yes, sir, please.
So again, working in intensive care unit, I've realized that DAMA and LAMA is probably, even we do it, but probably that is probably the worst possible thing which can be done. I think if we go by how the courts would interpret, they would say, "Aapne to haath khich liya," and they would not take it very seriously. We've had situations where the patient on triple inotropes on ventilator went LAMA from our hospital, and the patient was taken to another hospital, which was about 10 minutes from our hospital. And as soon as the patient reached over there was a loose comment by one of the junior resident who said, "Ye to pata nahi kab se mara pada hai." The entire family came to our hospital with a mob of about 20 to 30, saying that the patient was already dead and you just sent us LAMA. So what we do send our patients LAMA, but we do extensive amount of documentation. Whenever the summary is given, we put a date and time. We write down the vital parameters. We write down the neurological status of the patient. We do a blood gas analysis. in fact, the amount of documentation that we do for a LAMA summary is much more than a documentation that we do for a discharge summary. Because the patient is sick and there's a very high likelihood that the patient is going to deteriorate. So at the end of the day, so how our DAMA summary would look like, we write down a note saying that we've explained to the family that the clinical status can deteriorate on the way. We get a form signed from them where there is a clear understanding in an understandable language in English or Hindi, where we document the implications of going out from the hospital as the patient is on life support interventions. We make a handover to the ambulance person. So in fact, there is a form where we again note down the vital parameters once the patient is shifted to the ambulance from the ICU. So all those clinical details are documented.
Right, sir. So also in such scenarios, should a doctor from that hospital accompany?
No, I want to say, madam, please, I want to intervene in this because I was living literally in an ICU for 8 years. So I have seen so many road rocos, this angry mob continuously. But as sir explained, sending against medical advice requires a lot of documentation. I will say one legal in that also. Once the patient is leaving against medical advice, our doctor need not accompany the patient. But the real problem will be if the patient dies in an ambulance, like 108 ambulance, then there will be nobody to certify. So while I am sending the patient against medical advice, I used to inform, see, on the way the patient can die, and if the patient dies, you please realize, I cannot certify the cause of death, I will not certify death because you have left me. Then if the people are influential locally, then they will get a certificate from VAO as if it is a house death. But in this sort of things, I will tell you only thing, whatever our consent, whatever may be our documentation, the empathy, the communication with the attenders, with our face in a sober state as if the patient has died. So literally we have to talk for 30 minutes. We have to plead. If the patient may die, what you are going to do, so many things. But everything, the relationship is much more important in this difficult situation in addition to documentation.
Right, so here in PT, I'd like to come in because, sir, we are 18 minutes past 8.
Yes, sir.
And we're talking so much of consent. So I'll take consent from all the panelists. Can we quickly take up the question in the chat box?
Sir,
and Preeti, and continue with the discussions, having a part 2 to be continued next Tuesday. If you all agree, if you all give consent, can we continue with the other questions?
Yes.
Planned?
Yes, Dr. Naveen, it is not a written consent, oral consent.
Parekh sir, Dr. Parekh sir.
Video consent. Video consent.
Yeah.
Next Tuesday, we'll take a question in the chat box for next 12 minutes or so.
Dr. Naveen, I have one suggestion.
Yes, please go ahead, sir.
That instead of making it 2 hours, you make it 1 hour and we can have frequent sessions. 2 hours is little too long.
Yes,
for
sir.
the audience as well as us. 1 hour sessions will be good.
Okay, sir.
Audience attention also will be there.
Your consent is taken.
Every Tuesday with different things.
Arun, your consent is taken.
Thank you. Sure.
Dr. Sunil Bhargav has given a video consent. Dr. Baldeep Singh sir is nodding. Dr. Anjali Pure.
My pleasure, sir.
So we will, Preeti and Priyanka, quickly take up all the questions in the chat box which have come up today. And then we will continue this and we'll wind up at sharp 8:30. And we'll continue this medical legal session part 2 next Tuesday, 11 July from 6:30 to 7:30, maximum 7:45. Maximum 7:45. Over to you, Preeti and Priyanka. Quickly take up the question in the chat box.
1 minute. I want to put on record my thanks to Dr. Naveen because he postponed by 1 week just for my request. Because last Tuesday I was busy with some other lecture panel discussion. Thank you very much, sir.
Preeti, questions in the chat box, quickly. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. So we have taken many of them. So now I'll just go ahead while documenting the complication event in the OT or ICU. If the document, that document is considered obviously medico-legal. So anonymous attendance has asked that in panic mode while writing notes, if there is any overwriting, cutting, and corrections, can it be used against us in the court of law?
So my suggestion is if you've made a wrong entry, do not scribble. See, our general intent is we would just scribble it as if it has to be made ineligible. So what we do is strike off, sign on that strike off. Second most important thing, which we talked earlier, do not panic. That's the the most important thing. If such an event happens, take your time, take about 5 to 10 minutes, and then put down your notes. If it's a retrospective entry, let's say there was a resuscitation for about 40 minutes and the chronological entries cannot be made, you write down that the notes were put after the resuscitation. There's no harm in that.
Right, sir.
But as far as possible, do not alter your notes. I was reading a law case where they say the time of death was changed from 10:33 to 10:35. So 3 was made 5. So it was taken as an adverse thing. The time of death was changed from 10:30 to 11:30. Again, this was taken as an adverse. So as far as possible, do not try to alter your notes, whether during the event or after the event.
Okay, there is another question, interesting question. Are 2 anesthesiologists mandatory for pediatric surgery according to law? Can single anesthetic observe same patient in the OT and post-op ward? I think anybody can take it. Are 2 anesthesiologists mandatory for pediatric surgery?
So it is not mandatory, sir. It is not mandatory, but we can defend again, thinking that instead of one person is responsible, both the persons will be responsible. They charge a fees.
I will just quote one simile. When we compare many times with the airlines, anesthesia and airlines, both are having the same way. So you have always 2 pilots in an aircraft. We cannot afford in anesthesia, but that is a safety provision.
Right, sir. So I think I'll take one more question for today. In case of which is very pertinent to today's scenario in most of the metro states, especially if a geriatric patient, suppose say ASA 3 status, posted for high risk surgery, staying alone with the servant, has to undergo a surgery. So is the servant, can consent be taken or given by the servant?
It is already explained by Dr. Parag sir. Even at the wildest imagination, it cannot be done. Why? Another thing, why the question is like this? See, when she is elderly with a servant, what necessity we have to take up the case? No, solid no.
No.
Yes, sir. Sir, one query I would like to ask Baljit sir, because Baljit sir has talked very nicely about the communication to the patient's relatives as well as documentation. Sir, when there is a mishap in OT, how frequently, what is the optimum duration which should be put while writing notes? I mean, is there any such guidance that time interval of say 9 o'clock, 9:05 or 9:10 or 9:30 will be okay? Is there any specific?
Ideally, it should be every 5 minutes or so. If it is an intraoperative period, that would give a very complete picture of how the patient has behaved and how the things have occurred. The point here comes, in case you are alone, it may not be humanly possible for you to, write the notes as well as look after the patient as well. So in that case, I would suggest that there should be an assistant who is doing the job for you. And at the end of all that, when you are, through with the patient crisis, then you can sign after going through the documentation which your assistant has done. You can endorse that, yes, that I've done it. But I think in such a crisis situation, every 5 minutes, but most of the times, I think it is very nearly almost everywhere that what we have is a continuous monitoring of the patient. So we have multi-para monitors, so they're continuously displaying ECG, they're continuously displaying saturation, the heart rate, and everything. But when it comes to monitoring is one thing, but documentation, I think 5 minutes should be good enough.
I would like to add one thing.
Sir.
In case of a life-threatening situation, if there is no attendant, the hospital administrator can sign the consent. Am I correct?
Yes. I think yes.
So,
Dr. Parak, I want to add one thing about this documentation. The frequency, ISA guidelines says 5 minutes. International WFSA guidelines also say 5 minutes. Then I want to cite a case where there was a gap of 20 minutes in the recording parameters. And the court has said that I presume that anesthetist was not with the patient during these 20 minutes and the cardiac arrest happened that time. So therefore, it's better we record every 5 minutes, not 15 minutes or 20 minutes.
Very true. 5 minutes, yes.
I think that is Harvard Medical School's protocol, which they are mentioning.
That's true.
So even for surgeries like oncology surgery, etc., which run through the day, say 10-hour long surgery, is it feasible to record it every 5 minutes in the OT?
Madam, that is the reason why there is the easiest way. He has given the clue. You take a printout or you see the memory in the NIBP, multimarameter monitor. You just every 5 minutes, because see, routinely, once if a complication occurs, we will be writing a detailed notes about minute-wise. For a routine case, 10-hour surgery, if something is going on, as Sir pointed out, I wanted to tell, Dr. Parag pointed out, actually that 15 minutes interval, it's a Hyderabad case, it is mentioned, there is no mention for 15 minutes. So if you want to write, then you take a printout or you see in the monitor, go for a memory, then write every 5 minutes, see the thing. See, we have to, we cannot say that is humanly possible, it is impossible. We have to do because we are living in such an era. Documentation is important.
Sir, Mahesh sir was also discussing about the in absence of relatives. I think the medical superintendent or head of the administrative side in the institution can sign. But what about in private practice? Whom we can take into confidence?
Only in emergency, madam, only in emergency, proxy can sign. Only in emergency, I repeat. Nothing can be possible. Even the court has given a clear verdict. If suppose the patient is suffering from extradural hematoma, then you can operate it without a consent, because there the life considerations takes over legal consideration. But after his recovery, if you want to reduce a facial bone fracture, you have to get the consent. So again and again we stress emergency. Under the cover of emergency, you can do anything. Proxy can sign, you can take without any consent, you can take the case. But if it is an elective case, please insist a solid relative to be by the side to take care of the post-operative period at least.
Sir has very rightly said, emergency life-saving procedures, even anesthesiologist and the surgeon and one more doctor, they are also come into the play, maybe from administrative side of the thing, that okay, as a life-saving procedure, we are giving the surgery is required. Okay, so that can be documented in the file.
There is another question. That
Yeah,
can we make there is death on the table? Is it compulsory to can we declare the death on the table itself, or it is best that we take the patient to the ICU and then declare it?
We have already answered, madam.
That is answered.
We have already answered this.
Because that's a thing we should not be, because it's a thing, because it's been recorded also, live streamed also. So it's always better to put in ICU in the nearby ICU.
So I think we've reached the end of time limit for today.
Dr. Vishal Sikla says that if some mistake occurs in OT and the police seizes the file before putting the notes, what should be done? I think, Vishal, that should not be allowed to happen, and you should put all your notes.
Yes.
And maybe you go to some other room and close yourself and complete the notes. Before handing over the notes, you have to complete.
Dr. Naveen, if suppose that happens, then you blame the horoscope as your etiology, as the etiology. We cannot help it. These are all hypothetical questions. We cannot help it. That is the reason we say, be the friend of police. Over.
Nishant has asked one question which is slightly different. As a consultant in a government hospital, responsibility of how many OTs can we take with the help of PGs only? One case per consultant, one OT per consultant, or at times one consultant runs 3 OTs with 1 PG and 1 SR. So I think this is a often asked question. All we like to answer it. Dr. Parekh is raised hand and Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram is smiling. Dr. Parekh, sir, please.
One patient, one anesthetist. Simple, very simple. If you want protection, whatever excuse you give, it will be taken that patient is not fully attended. That is our ISA guidelines also.
Sir, if I'll slightly go further. One qualified anesthesiologist per table. Per case. And SR, senior resident, is a qualified anesthesiologist. Right? So if suppose there are 2 SRs on, 1 SR on each table, and over them one consultant is covering, that means there is a provision of 1 qualified anesthesiologist, a senior resident, is on each table, which is being supervised by 1 consultant. Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram, sir, you'd like to agree to that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You have clearly explained.
So that's the thing. So
I want to ask only one doubt. When can we leave? I am having so many missed calls. I want to leave with your permission.
I hope you are not going to a police station from here.
I have to attend to the duties, sir, because
so many questions are there in the chat box. Were there in the
we
chat
will continue.
And their humble thanks to all the panelists. And if some questions they will not been taken up this week, we'll take up next week. And as suggested by the panelists, we will be starting sharp at 6:30, maybe 6:35, and wind up by 7:30 to 7:45. And I'm really thankful to all the panelists. And as a coincidence would have been, out of 7, 6 are vice presidents, current or the past, of ISA National. Dr. Mahesh Sinha is the current vice president of ISA National, preceded by Dr. Anjali Bhure, then by Dr. Suresh Bhargava, and then by Dr. Baljeet Singh sir, then by Dr. Meenakshi Sundaram sir, Dr. Katyal is also there, and Dr. Parekh. And my dear Arun is my colleague, my MBBS and my MD classmate, and he fancies a lot of interest in medical legal cases. Thank you, Preeti, and thank you, Priyanka, for joining us today. And thank you for that great attendance. And we will see you all next Tuesday. And I really thank all the panelists. They agreed to join us next Tuesday itself. 11 July, 6:30 p.m., session 2. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Enjoy
Good night.
the entire
Good night.
Good night.
Everyone, good night.
Yeah, good night, everyone.
Recording stop.